Should the United States send tanks to Ukraine? The answer is yes. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So we just heard from Germany, and they said that they will not allow their Leopard 2 tanks to be exported to Ukraine. The issue is this. The UK has agreed to send some of their Challenger tanks to Ukraine. The problem is, the UK doesn't have very many of them, so they're only sending 12 tanks. The United States has agreed to send some of its Bradley armored personnel carriers to Ukraine. These are excellent weapons, but they are not tanks, fundamentally. The U.S. heavy tank, which is the equivalent of Germany's Leopard 2, is of course the Abrams. That's an incredibly powerful machine. The problem is it's essentially basically a jet engine with armor around it and a gun. You see, it's not powered by a traditional diesel engine. It's actually powered by a gas turbine. Well, that makes it that it can move very quickly and that it's incredibly maneuverable, but it also means that it needs special fuel, special training, and it is basically a maintenance hog. In fact, I heard former General David Petraeus once describe it as whenever you have a Abrams tank, you need a support crew to go along with it. So it's not exactly the easiest to use tank. The Leopard 2, though, from the Germans, is actually diesel powered. So it's easier to maintain, they have the fuel that they already need for it, and training for maintenance is going to be much easier. Well, up until now, Germany has said they don't want any Leopard 2s to be sent to Ukraine. Why is that? Well, they're afraid of escalating the conflict such that they basically enter into a direct conflict with Russia. Frankly, it's the same level of caution that has resulted in the United States limiting the weapons that are sent to Ukraine. Even though the UK said that it's sending heavy battle tanks to Ukraine, Germany has announced that the only way they will agree to send tanks to Ukraine is if the United States does as well. So you can see the problem here. The United States is kind of like, well, our tank isn't going to be very useful to the Ukrainians because it's so expensive to operate and difficult to maintain, while the Germans are saying we don't want to go out on a limb and provide our tanks to the Ukrainians, thereby potentially increasing the risk of an escalation with the Russians. Now, the reason this is such an important issue is, while the UK has very few main battle tanks, Germany and other NATO countries, including Poland, for example, have a whole lot of the Leopard 2s, up to 2,000 of them. Allegedly, Poland, Finland, and Denmark are interested in sending some of their tanks to Ukraine right now. But part of the deal when they order the tanks from Germany, in the first place, is that they agreed that they would not sell it to any third country without first getting permission from Germany. This kind of agreement, by the way, is not uncommon. It's in fact what the United States requires of anybody who buys our weapons as well. And it's why, for example, some time ago, there was a bit of a controversy over Poland being able to send F-16s to Ukraine. I did a video on that a little while ago. I'll link to it at the end of this video. So Germany's saying they don't want to send the tanks until the United States sends them. The United States is saying we don't want to send them because our tanks won't be much use to them. And my answer to that is just send them a couple tanks. Who cares if the Abrams tanks sit in a parking lot in Kyiv? If it means that the Ukrainians are going to get access to hundreds of Leopard tanks, do it. Essentially, what's happening right now is you've got Germany looking for political cover, and we should give it to them. Let's just go to the map here and look at why tanks are so essential for Ukraine. Now, the Ukrainians, according to their leadership, have said that they need 300 main battle tanks. Obviously, the dozen or so that the UK is sending are not going to be sufficient. The only way they will be able to get up to that number of tanks is if they get access to the German Leopard 2s. Now, you've probably seen this map before. This is, of course, Ukraine. The green area is the area that has been reclaimed by the Ukrainians. The pink areas, I guess they're pink, or is it orange? I don't know. But these are areas that the Russians have claimed. And the pinkish areas, I guess, down here and down here, these are the areas that were either annexed by the Russians in 2014. This is Crimea down here, which was illegally annexed by the Russians in 2014. And this is the breakaway Donbass Republic, which is basically a puppet government that was set up by the Russians over here. Now, if it seems to you like the lines have kind of stabilized, you would be right. Down here in the south, let's zoom in a little bit, the Ukrainians literally pushed up against the Dnipro River here. it's going to be very difficult for them to get to the opposite side here because of the fact that they have this huge natural obstacle. Up here in the north, let's go there, this is the area where Ukraine had their lightning-fast counteroffensive, where basically the Russians were paying attention down south and the Ukrainians outmaneuvered them and took over this area. But again, you've got a river here, and you can see down here that the Russians have spent some time really building up their defenses here. So it's made it very difficult for the Ukrainians to break through. And then down here, you can see all the Russian attacks down here. This is Bakhmut. This is the area where there's been basically a bloody and largely pointless battle going on, because really the areas that the Russians are interested in are over here, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. Those are the two largest cities in the Donbass that are still not occupied by the Russians. So they're trying to push toward that, and their aim is to somehow break through here, but they really haven't had very good luck, because from Bakhmut, you can get on a road over to Sloviansk here. So the problem is, how do you break through this? What we've essentially seen develop is something akin to what you saw in World War I, with these trenches, with soldiers basically standing on either side from each other. That's what has happened up here in the north. And they make it very costly to try to invade. That's why the Russians have had so much trouble taking Bakhmut over here, and why the Ukrainians have had so much trouble moving past their big offensive here from the fall. But the fact is that that's the type of fighting that tanks were invented to address. Tanks were invented in World War I because of the fact that they had these trenches, and they need to figure out a way to kind of create mobility that would be able to move forward despite the existence of these trenches. That's what we got with tanks, and that's why, for example, in World War II, you didn't really see the development of trenches. Ukraine has been a different situation, though, because of the fact that after the Russians' initial effort to try to take Kyiv, they've been stalled. And the Ukrainians have been making great use of the Western weapons to essentially destroy a lot of the Russian armor. So the Russians essentially don't have the tanks anymore that they need to be able to break through. The Ukrainians, for their part, just don't have the tanks that they need to break through. So the only possibility that we have of Ukraine either being able to break through, say, down here in the south or over here in the north, is if they have tanks that will be able to allow them to go through the trenches. That's why they need 300 tanks, and why the Leopard 2s are really the correct weapon for them. But without that cover by the US, the Germans don't want to send their tanks, or even allow other countries with those tanks, such as Poland and Denmark, to send them. So again, the solution's simple. Send a couple of our Abrams tanks, let them sit in some parking lot, and then the Germans will allow our allies to send some of these incredibly valuable Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. If we want this war to finally come to an end, that's what needs to happen. Well, as I said, I did a video a little while ago about some controversy between us and the Poles and Ukraine over some F-16 fighter jets. Why don't you check out that video over here? I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.